Well, welcome everybody. I see here with us some of our media friends out there, and we have a very good and well-represented mix of leaders from the Muslim community and allies. We're here to discuss the issue of Officer John Catanzara's comments that were very problematic and very unfortunate, comments he made vis-a-vis the Muslim community and other communities as well. Recently, he issued a video on Facebook, I think it was Friday, in which he attempted to address the concerns that the Muslim community had in advance of the police board meeting that is happening Thursday evening, in which we are calling for them to step up and take the recommendation of the accountability body that recommended that he be fired. So I want to address both why we're asking for this and his own comments that he made recently that were supposed to address our concerns, but failed to apologize, failed to take responsibility, failed to address the basis of our concerns. He claims that he claims that the main issue that he had with Muslims was an incident in which in Detroit, there was a doctor who committed this criminal act of female genital mutilation because of a religious rite of some sort, and that this is what he was condemning. And in the other instance, he was condemning the brutal killing, the alleged brutal killing, it hasn't been confirmed, but let's assume it is, of a woman by a mob in Afghanistan. I want to begin by saying that if he is outraged by these criminal acts, we share that outrage. There is absolutely no issue, no objection with outrage against these criminal, savage acts is what they are. The problem is his inability to focus his outrage on the individuals committing those criminal acts and his, in my opinion, intentful extrapolation of these sensational acts to the entire Muslim community, or to use his words, a large segment of Muslim Americans. That is the definition of Islamophobia, is to cherry pick sensational acts and extrapolate them and generalize about large segments of the Muslim population in order to evoke fear and hatred of the said group. And if that is his strategy, then his end game is to justify and advocate for an immigration ban on these undesirable populations. He mentioned the Muslim community in one instance in response to our calling for his firing on WBBM a couple of weeks ago. He went further to say that, well, Mayans in Mexico, they commit human sacrifice. Do you want them coming here and affecting, our culture? Again, you can see his thought process. His basically approximating Mexico to Mayans, and then Mayans with all of their diversity and all of their cult to human sacrifice, dropping virgins down volcanoes in his mind. And so that is the image he wants to project vis-a-vis immigration from that part of the world. And that shows, again, this cherry picking of sensational, often antiquated acts and of a minority, if ever. This FGM is a problem in some parts of the Muslim world and Christian world in Africa, by the way, female genital mutilation. But in the Muslim faith, it is not nearly something that is accepted. In America, it is not accepted by American Muslims. In much of the world, the highest seat in Sunni Islam is the Sheikh al-Azhar, the Grand Sheikh of al-Azhar in Cairo, Egypt. He has both condemned and prohibited female genital mutilation. So when he recently also came out guns blazing, defending and justifying the criminal and violent attack on our nation's capital, which was one of the worst, most nightmarish episodes against our democracy that threatened the fabric of our democracy, and he faced backlash, he backtracked as he normally does and attempted to justify his comments, and he said he was misinformed. Well, he's also extremely misinformed on Islam and Muslims and Sharia. If he chooses to take the view of the Islamophobes and anti-Muslims of what Sharia law is, or extremist Muslims, the minority extremist Muslims, on what Sharia law is, which basically means Islamic law, rather than the large segment of Muslim Americans and Muslims around the world, to use his language, that's his choice. I can volunteer to inform him better, but it's not my job. It's not my job any more than it is a journalist's job to inform him that what happened on Capitol Hill was a problem, and he had to wait for a backlash Most of us Americans didn't have to wait for a backlash. We were informed from the beginning. So this policeman who carries a gun and has a mandate has a problem with being informed aptly, or has cognitive problems, or is simply not up to the task of being informed properly. This is a man who can act on misinformation. He's got a gun and a mandate. So this troubles our communities. This puts our communities in peril. We ask the police board to do the right thing. This person is in a leadership position. He's not just a regular cop. And clearly has shown that he doesn't understand the basic of Islamophobia and bigotry in general is to cherry pick sensational acts and extrapolate them to the majorities as mentioned. Just use an analogy and close up. It's like looking at, I don't know, lynchings that happen in the United States, and some still do, or anti-Black racist hate crimes, some still do, as we all know, and say white Christian Americans are a problem, and it's no wonder that we're weary of them, and so more of them should not come from Europe. We should stave off white Christian immigration from Europe, or pedophilia in the church, you know, and so we should stave off Catholic immigration. We Muslims and other people of conscience and sanity will never look at these acts as problematic as they are, and we all condemn them, and say we should look at every Christian or every Catholic and say that they are a problem. He does that with Muslims. He does that with Mayans and Mexicans. So we need to tell him that's racist, that's Islamophobic, that's bigoted, and it needs to stop. And with that, I'll turn it back to Sadia.
Thank you, Ahmed. So I'd like to introduce our partners who are joining us today for this press conference. We have Nusrat Chaudhry from ACLU of Illinois. We have Abdullah Mitchell from CAIR-GC. We have Scott Simpson from Muslim Advocates, and we have Yesha Abraham and Dr. Dilara Saeed from Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition. So with that, I'll turn it to Nusrat, who will be speaking on behalf of the ACLU of Illinois.
Hi, and thanks for having me. I'm Nusrat Chaudhry, the legal director of the ACLU of Illinois. And at the bottom of this matter is that the Constitution requires Chicago police officers to afford equal and impartial justice to all communities. And the stated mission of the Chicago police reflects this constitutional mandate to protect all people, to enforce the law impartially, and to police in partnership with members of the community. But the failure of the police board to ensure that police leaders and officers are actually capable of affording that impartial justice alienates the communities the police are supposed to serve and threatens at best to leave those communities unprotected and at worst subject to unlawful policing such as racial and religious profiling. Like other public employees, a police officer retains the right to speak as a citizen on matters of public concern. And this is confirmed by a 1968 Supreme Court decision. But that decision underscores that this right is subject to a balancing test. A public employer, like the police board, may discipline its employees for private speech when that speech hurts the government employer's ability to further its mission. And as stated, that mission here and the constitutional requirement is to ensure equal and impartial justice to all communities. The statements by John Catanzara degrading Muslims, calling them savages, simply underscores that he is unable to afford that impartial justice to the American Muslim community and other people of color in the city of Chicago. His social media posts also give reasonable community members, including Muslims and people of color, the impression that he enforces the law in accordance with his bigoted views. And that impairs the ability of the Chicago Police Department as a whole to enforce the law impartially and in partnership with the community. The harmful impacts of his statements are exacerbated by the fact that he is not just any police officer, but a leader in Chicago's largest police union. So the police board this week should hold a fair evidentiary hearing as it's responsible to do. But if it substantiates the allegations of these statements against Muslims, it must find that John Catanzara is incapable of fulfilling his duties as a CPD officer to ensure equal and impartial justice. And it is imperative that the police board acknowledge that it is making this determination in the context of historic levels of disillusionment and distrust of Chicago police. We have witnessed just this past year alone the brutalization of peaceful protesters by Chicago police on the streets. And in recent weeks, we have also seen video of the horrific mistaken raid on Anjanette Young, a Black social worker whose home was invaded based on mistaken information and execution of a search warrant, resulting in her being held naked in front of armed police officers. This sort of treatment of Black and brown communities is endemic of a police department that needs to take seriously its responsibilities to serve and protect all communities. And that is exactly what is at stake in this hearing this week.
Thank you, Nusrat. Now we'll be moving over to Brother Abdullah Mitchell from CIOGC.
Thank you. Let me begin my remarks by saying that the Council of Islamic Organizations of Greater Chicago is a representative body of over 64 different Muslim organizations, many of whom who have members live and work in the city of Chicago. The remarks of Sister Chaudhry best outlines the concerns of our membership. We look at law enforcement as a body, a law officer, as one who is here to serve and to protect. We anticipate and expect of an officer to reflect fairness and impartiality in enforcing his duties, his or her duties as a law enforcement official. When you have an individual who has made the public statements that have already been referenced thus far in this press conference, particularly that directed specifically at Muslims, that they are savages, that they deserve a bullet. There is no context within which he as an individual can put this to make it acceptable. The role of a law of enforcement is to serve and to protect. Its success is prefaced or rests on our trust in them as fair and impartial arbiters and enforcers of the law. That is not possible with someone who holds these particular point of views. There is no confidence that we have as a community in a police officer that express these views, and we stand with the rest of the members of this panel in asking the police board to terminate his services as a police officer for the city of Chicago. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Abdullah. Next, we'll be moving on to Scott Simpson of Muslim Advocates.
Thank you, Sadia, and thank you so much to everybody on the call today and for the organizers of today's press call, CAIR-Chicago. As Sadia said, my name is Scott Simpson, and I'm the Public Advocacy Director for Muslim Advocates. We are a national civil rights group working in the courts, in communities, and in the halls of power to halt bigotry in its tracks. The reason I'm joining this press conference all the way from Washington, D.C. is because this is a matter of national concern. The words of John Catanzara strike fear in the hearts of American Muslims and their allies nationwide. As a national organization, we sleep with one eye open because we never know when or where we will have to respond to the next grisly anti-Muslim hate crime, the next threat, the next act of discrimination or bigotry. But there's a line in the sand for us where we cannot ever stand by. And that line includes threats of death, just like those made by John Catanzara. To be blunt, no Chicagoan is safe with a man like Catanzara patrolling the streets. Furthermore, his position as FOP president means that his behavior sets the standard for every other officer in the city. And this is on a police force that already has one of the nation's worst records of violence against people of color. And I hate to say it, but it's even bigger than that. There are 2,100 FOP lodges across this country, representing over 355,000 officers. Catanzara being saved by the Chicago Police Board, should that happen, sends a message to them too. To be clear, COPA has recommended this firing because of rigorous review of 17 statements amounting to 56 violations of the rules of conduct, not just one. And over his career, he's amassed at least 35 complaints of misconduct with multiple suspensions, with a bigotry of sexism and hostility towards Chicagoans from a wide range of backgrounds. And that's not even including his defense of the deadly insurrection in Washington, D.C. The police board is meeting this Thursday, and they have a duty to act on this recommendation this week. The national reputation of the Chicago Police Board is also at stake. If the Chicago Police Board fails to act on the recommendation that he be discharged, it will send a message to all officers in Chicago and in FOPs across the country. That message is that the Chicago Police Board will look the other way when it comes to police discipline, even with a record as horrific as Catanzara's. Thank you all very much for having me.
Thank you, Scott. And then lastly, with the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition, we have Yesha Abraham.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yesha Abraham, and I am here in representation of the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition, an organization that is dedicated to bringing civic justice to all residents of the state of Illinois, and we have over 100 partners and allies statewide. The issue of the words of Officer Catanzara are not to be taken lightly. This is a reflection of a very big problem that we have in the city of Chicago of distrust between our police officers and the public that they are supposed to protect and serve. Throughout the course of this summer, the coalition was approached by a body of Muslim police officers. And if you were to hear the words of Catanzara, you would think that there was no such thing as a Muslim police officer, but they exist. There are detectives, there are rookies, there are sergeants, there are chaplains that officiate the St. Jude service for the fallen, and they are integral members of the force. And they too are concerned. They shared their concerns with us as community members, that they too share mutual concerns about racial discrimination and religious discrimination, not just as community members at large, but as targets by their own colleagues. And when we hear the words of someone who represents one of the largest FOP constituencies in the country, it's little wonder. The mistake that Catanzara makes is attributing Muslim identity to something foreign, when in fact, the religion of Islam has roots in this country that outdate a great many Christian segments in this country. Islam has been on American soil as long as there have been people that are not indigenous on this soil. And in the city of Chicago itself, during a time where Italian, Irish, and other European immigrants were subject to great amounts of discrimination, the Black American Muslim community in the 1930s was erecting the nation's oldest standing mosque, which is still standing on 43rd and Wabash. And today, nearly 2 in 10 Chicagoans is Muslim. And so it becomes imperative that when we hear something like not all police officers, we agree, but we also understand that the actions of an action is not important because of how many people commit it, but because of the impact. And the impact of the words by someone with stature such as Catanzara's is staggering, especially considering the diverse and intersectional identities of its citizens. We must demand that the leadership of our city, no matter whether it's in police or in any other segment of our infrastructure, is a model of service and of diversity and of inclusion. And he is no exception. He must be replaced, and he must be replaced immediately, because as Scott said before, no Chicagoan is safe unless we can have confidence that we are going to have a police body that will protect all of us, one and all of us. Thank you very much.
I just want to conclude by reminding us of what dog whistles can do. We've had a nation ripped apart by dog whistles from the top in the last 4 years, culminating with this attack on our Capitol Hill. So let's not take dog whistles lightly anymore. When experts tell you what these dog whistles mean, our communities have suffered these dog whistles for a while. Listen and believe, because it's not news for us. This idea that the worst specimen, individual crime, can be looked at as a sample of the majority of the, in his words, a large segment of Muslim Americans. That's a lie. That's a bold-faced lie that is only true in the mind of a bigot. That there's something like this will cause anybody's jaw to drop in any Muslim corner of America. Something like what happened, a crime in Detroit, or a crime allegedly in Afghanistan, will cause any normal, sane Muslim's jaw to drop. He's lying when he says a large segment of Muslim Americans. That is the dog whistle, is to scare people and promote hatred of this group in order to justify and advocate for an immigration ban on these undesirable populations, which is racist in nature. So this needs to be addressed. Thank you very much once again, and you can be in touch with Sadia for any questions.